Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's episode is gonna be a banger and I know you're gonna love this one. As promised, today's episode is gonna be a longer one. I've pulled as many good stories from the last week or so that I could find to make sure that this video is as long as possible. If you wanna see another long one like this, let's hit 5,000 likes and I'll make it happen. Now, just sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some entitled parents. For some background, I used to work at a summer camp as a counsellor and as the director of the archery range. One of the things that the campus had the opportunity to do was sign up for merit badges, including one for the archery program. The requirements were to pass a short written exam and to show that their shooting skills had improved. Because it was summer and because some of the kids struggled with tests, I would offer to provide any assistance that they might want. I was willing to do anything short of giving them the answers or doing the test for them. The only caveat to this was that if they refused my help, then I would leave them to their own devices because there were other kids who did want it. During one of the sessions, a 14-year-old boy who we'll call Colby signed up for the badge. By the end of the first archery period, I could tell that he was going to have trouble with the exam. I made an offer to help him and he turned me down. Fast forward to the end of the week, the exam is administered and he bombs it, so he doesn't get the badge. After the closing ceremony, he comes up to me demanding to know why. I explained to him that he didn't pass half the requirements, and after trying to argue with me about it, he stomps off. About 10 minutes later, he comes back with his mummy in tow. She asks me the same question, and I give her the same answer. She then goes into a tirade about how her son is the golden child and deserves to have everything. As she's doing this, Colby is standing behind her wearing a smug look while I'm trying to decide if I'm actually hearing this and trying not to laugh in this woman's face. When she finishes, I tell her it's fine if she believes all of this, but I'm still not going to give him the badge because it wouldn't be fair to the other kids. Seeing how their expression changed was priceless. She tells me that she's going to talk to my boss about it. I tell her that if she feels that's necessary, then fine, but I'm pretty sure they're going to agree with me. A short while later, I see them both come speed walking out of my boss's office with anger written all over them. I go into the office, my boss spots me, smiles, and gives me a thumbs up. You know, when I was reading through the stories today, I thought, this one seems like a reasonably tame one to start with, and even though the entitled mum is pretty bad in this story, some of the stories to come are something you don't want to miss. I mean, all this entitled mum is doing is setting her child up for failure in the future, giving him a false expectation that no matter what he does in life, he'll be rewarded for it. To me, that sounds like some pretty darn good parenting, and this child will have no troubles in the future. Let me first give you some background so you get where people are coming from. My father has left a few years prior, mum bought a small house from the money from the divorce, and a few months before had gotten herself a boyfriend. At first, I was truly happy that she moved on, but soon, I realized that she had fallen for some real piece of crap. Now, you need to understand that my father was an alcoholic and a narcissist, so my mum's normal meter was truly broken. Anybody treating her halfway decent must have appeared like Prince Charming to her. So please don't judge her too harshly for her choice. Now, he was not only halfway decent, he actually treated her well, though he was an a-hole to me. He bought her flowers, went out to eat regularly, etc. But what I realized, and she did not, was that he was a parasite. He had maybe $100 to his name, and his only income was support from the state, which was a couple of $100. Now, I already hear you asking, how did he afford flowers and going out? The answer is by living rent-free and having all of his costs paid for until he gets back on his feet. One last thing, as the headline already told you, he soon started to show an immense entitlement towards me. Basically, he said that this is his house, so now I have to follow his rules. Of course, I told him that this is my mum's house and not his, and I do not have to do jack unless mum tells me so. He took that really badly since he had an ego problem, as you've probably already guessed. I tried to tell my mum, but she wouldn't believe me since he'd always acted very nice to me when she was around. But as soon as she was not around, the Cold War started. He pulled a lot of small things, like demanding in a patronizing voice that I bring him some beer while watching TV with me while my mum was on the loo. When she came back, he told her he had asked me nicely to bring him a beer when I stood up to get something, but I refused, insulted him, and sat back down. So of course, she told me to apologize and get him a beer. I tried to explain, but she would not let me, so he kept pulling petty crap to establish dominance. After this whole story, I asked my mum why she would always believe him and not let me explain. Apparently he had told her that I was super jealous that he was in the house and wanted to get rid of him by making him look bad. So she backed him up to show me that he is not going anywhere. So now, it's time for the main act. I had gone out for the night from Friday to Saturday and had come back home at 3 AM. My mum was gone over the weekend and he effing exploded, saying things like, "How dare I disrespect him by coming home this late?" I told him calmly that he does not get to declare a curfew on me, and my mum allows me to come home this late, which is true, provided I stayed at the house of 3 specific people that I am friends with and whose parents are my mum's friends. He flipped out even more and called me a dirty liar. He then gave me the classic, "As long as you put my legs under his table," and me being a smartass of course answered, "This is my mum's house and my house. You are a guest here." He screamed at me that he's gonna kick me out of the house and I will not be allowed back until my mum returns. I screamed back that he cannot do that since this is not his house, and I threatened to call my mum. He, emboldened by her backing him up all the time, told me to do just that. But I had better not lie to her and tell her what is actually happening. I put her on speaker and told her, "He is trying to kick me out of the house until you come back Monday." Keep in mind, it was Saturday at the time, and she did not believe me and told me to put him on the line. So he started by telling her that I disrespected him as the man of the house by coming home so late and then lying to him about this being okay when I stayed at a friend's house, and that I needed to learn to respect him. He continued saying that it's up to him how he disciplines me since she is not there. Then he lied and said he told me to be home by 1 AM. For the first time, he let his mask slip and she picked up on it right away. She said to him, "So let me get this straight. I allow my son to be out till 3, but you think that you get to overrule my decision on my son, and now you think you get to kick my son out of his own house?" At this point, he realized that he effed up and he tried to get her to take his side, but only dug his hole deeper and said, "Well, he keeps not respecting me in my own house. If you let him win now, he will never respect me." She says to him, "And you think that the right punishment for disrespect is to kick him out for 2 days? He says, "Yes, finally, you get it. I knew that you would come around." My mum goes, "Well, he did nothing wrong since he was allowed to go out that long, and you have no right just to overrule my decisions on my son." He starts to say but, my mum cuts him off and says, "I am not done. Apparently you think the right punishment for your disrespect is to kick you out until Monday." He says, "But I only have $100. This is not fair. Where am I supposed to go?" My mum finishes up by saying, "I'm sure that my son had even less money and you do not give a crap. You have 30 minutes to leave and I'll be telling the neighbor to check. If you're still here in half an hour, he will call the police and have you trespassed. When I come home Monday, we will talk. I am such an idiot that I kept believing you over my son." Once my mum came home, I told her how he kept pulling this crap on me, and she was so sorry that she kept backing him up. I had tried to tell her many times that he treated me exactly like my father did when she was not around, which was one major reason for their divorce. But since he treated her so differently and acted so differently than my father, she believed him that I was jealous and tried to get rid of him. But when she heard him say those words that my father said so many times, "You owe me respect since you live in my house," she suddenly realized that I was telling the truth all along while he was the liar. She never realized how badly he treated me and how entitled he acted since they had hidden it so well before. But when he started talking about deserving respect in his own house from me, a house that he did not put a penny into, but was somehow his. Even worse was thinking that he could overrule her on her own son. My father would also overrule her decisions. So she finally saw through him and got all the evidence she needed that I was telling the truth all along. They broke up that Monday and he never got back into the house. They met for coffee and she demanded her keys back. Originally, she wanted to give him a month, but when she entered the bar they met at, he right away started to scream at her about how dare she kick him out of the house like this, and that now he would never get the respect from me that he is entitled to. So she told him that she is only there to ask for her keys back and that they are through. The ending of this story, quite frankly, made me really happy, because any time, especially in an entitled parent story, where somebody can get out of a really toxic relationship or have that person who is an entitled parent and is really toxic removed from their life is an amazing job. It's not always easy, but I'm really glad that OP's mum in this case came to their senses and did finally believe their son. I hope for the sake of both the son and the mum that they don't come across somebody like this in the future. Everyone seems to get a kick out of reading how horrible my father and stepmother were. This one is fresh on my brain, so I'm going to put it in here while I'm able to remember. Someone wanted to know another tale, so here it is. Obligatory, this is paraphrased, with my mother having filled in some of the blanks, as I've blocked out a lot of this time in my life. This happened after I'd no longer been able to go to therapy. Right before the summer, and due to all of this and more, I was going to end up having to repeat my junior year. It was 2 months before school would let out, and there was no way that I could get my grades up to stay in the honor program that I was in for high school. Because of this, my stepmother had decided to approach me about my room. You see, as a little backstory, my father and stepmother had trouble getting pregnant a few times. My brother was a miracle baby and they wanted another after him. They tried for years even to conceive my little sister. Because they were trying, they moved from the small house they had for the 4 of us to a slightly bigger one. It was at this time that they started trying for my sister. Fast forward to me being 17, about to fail due to the way they treated me and other similar factors. In my state, siblings of the opposite gender can share a room up until a similar age. After that, it's considered illegal. My brother had reached that age and thus couldn't share a room with my sister any longer. This is where I come in. And at this stage, I had my own room. When we first moved in, they took me shopping to IKEA and let me pick out my own room worth of furniture. Bed, dresser, side table, air cushion. They even painted my room to suit the room theme. That being said, my stepmother decided that my brother needed my room. She told me that since I was failing my junior year and will be graduating a year late, that I could move into the playroom and get a job and start paying rent, since by this time I would be 18 when the next school year began. Normally, this wouldn't be such a bad setup. The playroom is huge and it had lots of space. And to some, she even had a point. But I didn't answer her because I didn't know what to think. My stepmother then calls my mother over one day to sit down with me and talk to me about failing, saying how I was going to end up just like my mother by going from man to man and working a minimum wage job. All of this to pressure me into giving up my room. And eventually, I gave in. However, this is where the catch comes in. The playroom was still my brother and sister's playroom. Their toys would still be there and they could go in and out as they pleased. This meant that they constantly went through my stuff and it wasn't really my room. In addition, there was no door, and with the way the playroom was set up, as it was an addition to the house added on by the previous owners, there were large windows that had never been removed that looked into the playroom from the kitchen. I had no privacy. If I wanted privacy, I had to get a job to pay for my own curtains and my own door. It was supposed to teach me responsibility of being an adult since I was failing a grade and therefore couldn't go to college like that. Their reasoning was that they were gonna convert it into an area for me when I went to college, but since I'd failed a grade, they decided that I could pay for it and be an adult. Some of these entitled parent stories just hit a little bit harder than the others, and this one is definitely one of those. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do talk a lot about how sorry I feel for people because their entitled parents are setting them up for failure in the future. And I think when I read stories like this and I've seen the impact that it's actually had on them long term, it does really make me feel bad, and I just wish there was a way that we could put an end to entitled parents. So, my girlfriend of 5 years, who's called Haley, has a really entitled mother. It was so bad that she moved out to live with her father in another state. Her mother constantly harasses her to go and stay and babysit her almost 10-year-old brother so that she can do as she pleases without the responsibility of a parent. With all this stuff currently going on, my girlfriend has been staying home and keeping her safe. Her mother keeps spamming her to go out of state just to babysit during a massive pandemic. When Haley refuses, her mother uses the guilt trip that her brother misses her. Mind you, her mother kicked her out at 17 and told her that she wasn't allowed to set foot in the house after the law got involved of her perfect parenting. My genius of a girlfriend got the bright idea to get her mother to leave her the F alone. Every time she gets harassed, she spams stupid worms on a string memes and it works. All Haley has to do is threaten her mother with the worms and her mother stops out of fear of her phone freezing. The screenshots are amazing. My girlfriend be smart using worms to shoot her entitled mum. Glad that I'm getting married to her in October. I love her goofy ass so much. Straight up, could you imagine being so scared of a meme that it stopped you from messaging your own daughter because you thought your phone was gonna freeze? I'm literally sitting here right now trying not to piss myself laughing because this is one of the weirdest entitled parent stories that I've ever read. Seriously, for this story, just forget about the entitled mum because she's just whatever, and just appreciate the fact that she is so scared of worms that she doesn't harass her daughter anymore. I had a discussion with my dad, and I live in my own apartment, so sometimes I visit them from time to time. Anyway, one day during a visit, my dad was telling me about personal responsibilities. My dad was angry at me for being selfish. Basically, I live in an apartment with my sister. I do my own cooking, buy my own groceries, and clean the dishes daily. Also, I make sure my room is clean. My sister is more chaotic. I love her, but it's her personality. I do not boss her around, and if she wants something, I will do it. She doesn't clean dishes, but she uses clean dishes. Sometimes, there are no clean spoons at all. There's like 20 used spoons going around. I told her once as a reminder to clean the dishes. I never bagged, I only asked once, and I took 1 plate and 1 spoon in my room that I clean daily. My sister also wanted me to wake her up for alarms. I usually wake up at 5 AM and I drive to work at 6:30 AM, and my sister goes to work at 9 AM and sometimes she asks me to borrow my car. I told her I'm okay with it as long as she pays for gas. Anyway, my sister was pissed and says how selfish I was for not cleaning her dishes and giving her my car when I need it for business and work-related trips. If she wanted to, she could afford to pay for an Uber. When I visited my family, my dad drove his car and he was talking to me about responsibilities. He told me that I shouldn't be selfish, and I told him that I have work, I have friends, I clean my own dishes, and I asked him why she can't clean her own dishes. He said to me, "Don't blame others," and I replied that he was blaming me. I also said, "Well, what about when you are in the house? Don't you tell us to clean our own dishes? Why don't you have the responsibilities?" He was angry and threatened to throw me out of the car. I said, "You threatened to throw me out because I disagree with you? I don't owe her anything. It's her dishes and she can do her own dishes." My dad was like, "You will never learn responsibilities." My mum's response was, "Your sister is busy." I was angry because I work from 7 AM till 6 PM and I also work unpaid extra hours because I care about my job. I barely have free time and my sister works from 10 AM to 3 PM. I replied to my mother, "And what, you think I have nothing to do?" I then screamed at both my mum and dad, "I am not a maid for her. I love my sister, and my sister was just frustrated at herself because she realized her mess can get out of hand." After that discussion, she began to use plastic plates. My parents never tried to tell me how to behave again. Honestly, I mean, it wasn't the best reaction from my part, but like, it's called selfish if I don't want to be a maid and I want equal responsibilities, or at least each to their own. I mean, I never complained about her dishes, and my parents always looked at me as if I'm supposed to do something about it. To be honest, I just think the parents are pretty crap. The sister doesn't seem like too bad of a person, and it seems like she recognized her mistakes and started using plastic plates, which is great. Obviously, I don't mean for the environment, I mean it in the sense of this story. But to me, it just seems like a classic case of parents having favorites and acting in an entitled way towards one kid over the other. At least this person took it pretty well, and his parents are off his back now, and that's all you can really hope for, right? 2 entitled parents down, and I'm sure there's millions to go. I made a reservation at a nice restaurant for my anniversary. Our reservation was for 8:30 PM, but the hostess said that they were running a little behind. After 20 minutes of waiting, a couple walked in behind us and asked for a table. They didn't have any reservations, and the hostess said that they were looking at a 45-minute wait. The couple stood behind us discussing options. Then 5 minutes later, the hostess said that our table was ready. The woman pointed out to us that she was 7 months pregnant and would really appreciate it if she could sit before us. I said no because we had a reservation and they did not. Then I suggested 2 places across the street that always have seats available. The couple was visibly annoyed and said something under their breath about how rude I was. Had they made a reservation, I would have gladly switched so they could seat a few minutes early, but they were basically asking for our reservation. We were looking at having to wait another 45 minutes. There were multiple restaurants in the area, so there were options. There was also bar seating available, and they could have gotten food there. Can I just say, you don't suddenly become 7 months pregnant? Like, unless this place had a 9 or 10 month waiting period to get a reservation, there is no excuse for coming in and trying to take somebody else's reservation because you're 7 months pregnant. If you knew you were going to this place and you knew you wanted to get in and eat at a certain time, you make a booking just like everybody else does. In fact, given your situation and that you probably can't stand around for a long time, it's probably more important for you to make a reservation than the average person. I don't know, man. You just know this person's going to be in another story sometime in the future because, well, the moment they have that kid, they're just going to get worse. So my mum is still working as an essential worker. She works at an international academy that basically runs like a daycare for kids whose parents work for the NHS or have other essential roles and no one to leave their kids with. She doesn't mind this, but she's been dealing with some absolute a-hole parents that make my blood boil. For example, one of the things she does is not only feed those kids while they're there, but she also goes out of her way to make dinner for the kids to take home with them in case their parents have no time to cook. Apparently, she has been receiving complaints from certain parents saying things like there were not enough grapes in the fruit salad or the food was cold. Do you think I have time to warm it up? And my favorite of all, can't you make something that my child actually likes? Mind you, the school would always post photos of the food that is being cooked that day, and it always looked absolutely incredible and has variety so that all of the kids have their dietary requirements taken care of. It's absolutely infuriating that my mum is cooking and providing free food for these children every single day, including the weekends, and that is the thanks and appreciation she gets. I said it in the last episode of Choosing Beggars, but everything that's going on is bringing the absolute worst out in people. Rather than coming together, being grateful and appreciating anyone who is able to help them, especially when it's at no cost, people have decided that now is the time to come out and show their true colors. I know these people are probably working pretty hard and everyone does have an off day, but if this is happening consistently, it's just not good enough. Another bushfire, another community at risk. The plan is simple. Start a backburn along the back fences of the community to create a fire break and contain the fire. The wind is blowing towards the community, so the backburn will be going against the wind in good conditions. We start lighting up the bush. 90% of the residents put up with the smoke and either close their windows and doors or come up and talk to us over the fence asking if they can do anything. Now, I will take this time to mention that we were in full face respirators to protect our lungs from the smoke and we can barely talk out of them. And when you are next to a running pump, you can barely hear anything. So, back to the story. We are walking along and pause at a house to monitor the burn. There is quite a fuel load, so we wanted to make sure it is burnt. Don't notice anything until we see a resident trying to use our second hose line and we're like, what? A quick discussion ensures, and this mother had come out to inform us that the smoke was affecting her kid. Okay, this happens, so what? She had come out to demand that we put out the fire that we were lighting, and when we ignored her, she then decided to do it herself. We gave her a quick apology as it's noisy and we didn't hear her and she is understanding. But she still insists that we put out the fire or give her kid one of our masks. No, I'm not going to affect my health for your kid. Also, he hasn't done the course. We advise her to close her doors and windows, but we are going to burn to protect her house. This is where she demands to see our commander, who at this point in time is hiding in the cab. He gets out, walks up to her, and issues her an on-the-spot fine for obstructing an emergency service worker. I can't think of anything more annoying than having a Karen come up to you while you're trying to do your job, something that is absolutely one of the most essential things that you can do in literally protecting a community from a bushfire, and trying to tell you that you can't do your job because it's affecting her kid. This Karen is probably then the same person who would blame the fire department if anything happened to her house. Sometimes, when it comes to entitled parents, there's just no way to win. So, back in high school, I was classmates with a kid who, well, wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Take note that we were sophomores in grade 10 by now, so our batch had been together for years. It's a small private school, so we were all pretty tight-knit. However, his entitled mum believed that he was the perfect little angel who would outshine everybody else. In reality, he only got those since his entitled mum would bribe their way through the system to let her kid have the benefits. I.e., instead of trying out, the entitled mum would pay their way into sports teams so he'd get credit only to be benched the whole game. The worst part was that as years went by, and to this day honestly, the kid bought into entitled mum's narrative and believed that he was superior to many of us, with the entitled mum making many outlandish claims. Among these tactics was something that I'd noticed for a while. See, in the Philippines, instead of dividing the academic year into semesters, we had quarters, and within each quarter, we had 2 major long tests, which are LTs, and after each quarter, we had a quarterly exam. As each quarter progresses, the QEs would aggregate lessons from the quarters that had passed, along with that quarter's lessons. Anyway, for some time now, our class had noticed that this kid would call in sick on the day of major exams, and then entitled mum would call on the kids in the higher bracket grades, who were supposedly close with the kid, to ask the exact content of the tests so that they could study for the retest. Now, I'm not exactly a star student, okay, not at all, but my grades were decent enough for her to consider me within the call list. I mean, I hung out with the guy and he was nice enough until his entitled mum began inflating his ego. So during the third QEs for algebra, surprise surprise, the kid calls in sick. Now, this was pretty expected since everyone had already been betting on it, and sure enough, by evening, the entitled mum calls me up asking exactly what was on the test, each question and answer. I tell her off and she starts spouting on how grades are important and I'm just caring for the future of my child, and he deserves to be in the honor society and you should be more charitable. Okay. Whatever, lady. And by this point, I'd had enough. So I comply, but with a twist. I end up giving her all of the items of our second QE. Without a thought, she begins typing it down, and I can hear her frantic fingers on the keyboard through the phone, and begins taking down each and every word I say. Here's the kicker. Our algebra teacher did not even include lessons from the past QEs. She thanks me profusely and how I'm such a saint and a savior to her son. Quit the sweet talk, lady. Anyway, kid comes in, takes the test, and oh look. He got an F. To add insult to injury, our teacher was the one who put in the numerical percentage so we had a clear idea of how we did. The kid got a 35%. The entitled mum confronts me and says, "You lied. What you told me wasn't on the test." I played the ignorance card and said, maybe he switched it up, and they never bothered me again. He dropped from the Honor Society that year and people caught wind of the story and started doing the same thing. Parents, never spoon feed your kids. It never works out well. We're in college now, and all updates on the kid's college life are non-existent. We don't even know if he's in college. Every time we take a reunion, he's evasive on the topic, despite everyone openly talking about their ups and downs in uni life. Last we heard, the entitled mom was claiming that her little Einstein was taking a double degree. We have a classmate whose uncle is a professor in the said degree, and he said that he's never heard of the kid there. Remember how I said earlier on in the episode, if you spoon feed your kids and make them think that everything they're doing is correct, you're going to set them up for failure in the future? Well, this story is testament to exactly that, because from what it sounds like, this kid, with his inflated ego, completely failed. Now, I'm not yet a parent, but I can say from my own experience and just common sense, that I'm pretty sure the way to set your kid up for success is to let them make mistakes and learn from them. If a kid thinks that they've never made a mistake in their life, well, the moment they do something wrong in the real world and you're not there to protect them, they're pretty much not going to stand a chance. Alright everyone, that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have stuck around to the end and you did enjoy the video, don't forget to smash that like button down below. Just a reminder that if we do hit 6,000 likes on this video, the next episode of Entitled Parents I do will be half an hour long. At this stage, I'm probably going to be doing an episode of Choosing Beggars tomorrow. I have been struggling to find enough really good ones to make a full episode, so hopefully there's enough good ones that are recent now, and I'll be definitely doing that if I can. But I don't want to drag this outro out too much, so I'm going to look at wrapping things up there. Before I do end things though, I just want to let you know that there are two awesome videos that will be appearing on your screen right now, one of which I would highly suggest you click on. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to enjoy one of those and you will not be disappointed. But otherwise, that is going to wrap things up for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video. Bye.